1. Karen Reed. It was a frigid January morning in 2022 when the body of Boston police officer John O'Keefe was discovered lifeless in the snow outside a home in Canton, Massachusetts. He was bruised, bloodied, and barely recognizable. The discovery shocked the tight-knit community, but what came next unraveled into one of the most polarizing homicide investigations in recent Massachusetts history. Karen Reed, a finance professor and John's girlfriend at the time, was quickly identified as the prime suspect. Prosecutors allege that after a night of drinking and arguing, Reed dropped O'Keefe off at a house party, reversed her SUV, and intentionally struck him, leaving him to die in the snow. They claim the taillight on her vehicle shattered upon impact, and that fragments were later found near the body. Combined with text messages allegedly referencing guilt and alcohol, the prosecution built what they called a clear case of second-degree murder. But from the moment charges were filed, Reed's defense team pushed back hard. They allege a police cover-up, corruption, and the tampering of key evidence. According to her attorneys, O'Keefe was beaten inside the house by individuals with law enforcement ties, then dragged outside and left to die. And Karen Reed was framed to protect the real culprits. They argue that forensic inconsistencies, suspicious timelines, and deleted text messages all point to a deeper conspiracy within the local police ranks. What began as a domestic homicide case spiraled into a sensational courtroom drama, with dueling narratives that divided the public. Some see Reed as a cold-blooded killer who lashed out in jealousy. Others view her as a scapegoat caught in the gears of institutional corruption. Outside the courthouse, rallies have been held, some supporting O'Keefe and his family, others chanting "Free Karen Reed," waving signs that accuse investigators of lying under oath. As of 2025, the trial is still ongoing. Expert witnesses have testified on everything from crash impact physics to the temperature of snow. Social media sleuths have turned the case viral, dissecting every detail. The prosecution insists Reed is the only one responsible. The defense maintains she's being sacrificed to protect those in power. In the end, it all comes down to a single moment on a snowy night. A moment that ended a man's life, shattered reputations, and put one woman on the edge of a lifetime behind bars. Whether Karen Reed is guilty of murder or the victim of a cover-up remains for the jury to decide. But either way, her case has already etched itself into the annals of true crime, as a chilling reminder that sometimes the truth doesn't just get buried in the snow, it gets crushed beneath it. 2. Veanitta Lenon. It was a quiet Monday afternoon in March 2023 when emergency responders arrived at a modest home in Miami Gardens, Florida. Inside, they found 49-year-old Jason Bloomfield slumped on the floor. A gunshot wound to the chest, no signs of forced entry, and no struggle. Just one bullet, one suspect, and one story that still doesn't add up. The woman accused of pulling the trigger? His live-in girlfriend of nearly a decade, Veanitta Lenon. According to the arrest report, Veanitta claimed the shooting was accidental. She told officers that she had picked up a gun from the bedroom to make a point during an argument and that it went off unintentionally. But detectives weren't convinced. The firearm had to be manually cocked, and the bullet's trajectory pointed to a deliberate aim. The 911 call, too, raised red flags. In it, Veanitta reportedly sounded calm, detached, even as her partner lay dying on the floor. Prosecutors argue that the entire scene had the hallmarks of an intentional killing, rooted in jealousy, financial pressure, and years of mounting tension behind closed doors. Those who knew Jason describe him as a gentle, quiet man who avoided confrontation. A longtime employee at a local logistics company, he was said to be planning a fresh start, a new job, and possibly even ending the relationship. Veanitta, friends said, had grown increasingly controlling, worried about losing both his attention and his financial support. But Veanitta's defense team paints a different picture, one of a volatile relationship, mutual arguments, and emotional instability on both sides. They argue that the gunshot was indeed accidental, and that Veanitta had no history of violence or criminal behavior. In fact, she had no prior arrests at all. A former nursing assistant, she had spent years caring for others, not harming them. The idea that she would suddenly snap, they say, doesn't match the woman her family knew. Still, the evidence is stacking up. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera reportedly captured audio of the argument escalating, and then the unmistakable crack of a single gunshot. In court filings, prosecutors describe it as an execution-style shooting disguised as an accident. They've charged Veanitta Lenon with second-degree murder. She has pleaded not guilty and remains behind bars awaiting trial. The case hasn't made national headlines, but it speaks to a broader, haunting truth. Even long-term relationships can end, not with a breakup, but with a body on the floor. And as Veanitta prepares to stand trial for murder, the question remains, was it a tragic accident born of emotion, or a cold decision made in a moment of rage? Only a jury will decide if Veanitta Lenon acted out of heartbreak or out of hate. 3. Courtney Clenney. On April 3, 2022, police were called to a luxury high-rise apartment in Miami's Edgewater neighborhood. Inside, they found 27-year-old Christian Obumseli bleeding to death from a single stab wound to the chest. Standing nearby, covered in blood and visibly distressed, was his girlfriend, 25-year-old social media influencer Courtney Clenney, known online as Courtney Taylor. What followed was a case that stunned the public, not just for its brutality, but for how quickly it exposed the dark side of a seemingly glamorous relationship. Courtney and Christian had moved to Miami only months earlier, hoping for a fresh start. But neighbors told police their apartment was anything but peaceful. Surveillance footage showed frequent shouting matches, with building staff documenting multiple noise complaints. One elevator security camera even captured Courtney violently striking Christian weeks before his death. It painted a picture of a toxic, spiraling relationship, one full of rage, jealousy, and control on both sides. Courtney's attorneys say she acted in self-defense. They argue Christian was the aggressor that day, that he attacked her, and in fear for her life, she grabbed a kitchen knife and struck once. But prosecutors say the evidence tells a different story. The autopsy revealed the knife had been plunged 3 inches deep, a downward angle inconsistent with a panicked, defensive movement. And phone records show she had just posted racy content on OnlyFans hours before the incident, leading prosecutors to suggest a calculated mindset, not a fearful one. The couple's text history also adds to the complexity. Christian reportedly sent dozens of messages over the months describing Courtney as violent, emotionally abusive, and threatening. In one, he wrote, "I can't take this anymore. You are killing me inside." But Courtney's team has emphasized that Christian wasn't perfect either, pointing to claims of verbal abuse and manipulation on his part. Their defense centers on a long-term pattern of mutual dysfunction, one that tragically exploded into violence. Public opinion has been fiercely divided. Some see Courtney as a victim of domestic abuse who snapped under pressure. Others believe she's using her status and privilege to escape accountability. Another influencer who thinks the rules don't apply. The case has ignited conversations about gender roles in domestic violence, particularly when the accused is a woman and the victim is a man. Courtney was arrested in Hawaii 4 months later, where she had checked into rehab for substance abuse and PTSD. She was extradited back to Florida and charged with second-degree murder. Her trial has been delayed multiple times, and as of 2025, she remains in custody awaiting a full trial. What began as a tragic death in a luxury apartment has since become a lightning rod for justice, for gender politics, and for the question of what really happened behind the filtered images of an influencer lifestyle. Was this an act of fear or a fatal flash of entitlement? 4. Whitney Wilcox. In March 2024, police in St. Clair County, Illinois, were called to a quiet residential neighborhood where 39-year-old Jeremy Rogers had been found dead in his home. The cause of death? A brutal stabbing. At first, the case seemed like another tragic domestic incident, one more statistic in a growing list of relationship violence. But what followed revealed a disturbing twist that prosecutors say speaks to something far more calculated. The woman at the center of it all was 34-year-old Whitney Wilcox, Jeremy's on-again, off-again girlfriend. Wilcox was initially arrested shortly after the murder, but released due to what authorities described as lack of sufficient evidence to hold her. But Jeremy's family never stopped pushing. They insisted this wasn't just a lover's quarrel gone wrong, it was murder, and they believed Whitney was responsible. For months, the case went cold. Then, in a stunning turn of events in late 2024, Wilcox was rearrested and charged with first-degree murder. The trigger? A combination of forensic evidence and what officials described as inconsistencies in her prior statements. A re-examination of the crime scene reportedly uncovered DNA under Jeremy's fingernails and on a nearby kitchen knife, DNA that matched Wilcox. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera also placed her near the house in the hours leading up to Jeremy's death, despite her earlier claims of being elsewhere. Prosecutors now allege that Wilcox lured Jeremy into a confrontation that escalated into deadly violence. The two had a rocky history, with past reports of domestic disturbances, including at least one 911 call from Jeremy himself months earlier. Friends of the couple say the relationship was volatile and fueled by jealousy, financial disputes, and alleged infidelity. Wilcox, for her part, maintains her innocence. Through her attorney, she claims she had nothing to do with Jeremy's death, that someone else could have been responsible, and that her DNA being at the scene was natural given their relationship. Her defense team has also suggested that law enforcement succumbed to public pressure to make an arrest, pointing to the months-long gap between her release and rearrest as evidence of a flawed investigation. But for Jeremy's family, the second arrest was vindication. They'd long argued that the justice system was overlooking the seriousness of the case simply because the accused was a woman. If the roles were reversed, one relative told local media, this would have never taken so long. As of 2025, Whitney Wilcox remains behind bars awaiting trial. No plea deal has been offered, and the state appears determined to prosecute to the fullest extent. Her court date is scheduled for late fall. In a world where the line between love and control often blurs behind closed doors, this case forces one uncomfortable question into the light. How many red flags must be ignored before someone ends up dead? Monica Sementilli. In the upscale neighborhood of Woodland Hills, California, Monica Sementilli was known as the elegant wife of Fabio Sementilli, a beloved celebrity hairstylist and executive for Wella. Together, they lived a life of prestige, beauty, and high society. But beneath that glamorous surface, there was a secret burning with resentment, lust, and betrayal. In January 2017, Fabio was found stabbed to death outside their home. The initial theory, a robbery gone wrong. But months later, the truth emerged, and it was far more chilling. Fabio had devoted his life to the beauty industry. He traveled the world giving seminars, and by all accounts, he adored Monica and their family. But prosecutors say Monica wanted more. More money, more freedom, and most importantly, more time with her secret lover, a man named Robert Baker. Investigators allege that Monica and Robert were entangled in a passionate affair, and that together they plotted to eliminate the one person standing in their way, her husband. The attack was brutal. Fabio was ambushed in his own backyard, stabbed multiple times, and left to die beside the family pool. His Porsche was taken to stage a robbery, but something didn't add up. Nothing else was missing. There was no sign of forced entry. And eventually, phone records, surveillance footage, and digital footprints would point in one direction: inward. Monica's alibi began to fall apart, and investigators began piecing together a story of calculated deceit. What began as whispers of infidelity evolved into a full-blown murder-for-hire investigation. Authorities say Monica stood to gain over $1.6 million in life insurance. Text messages between her and Baker reportedly show months of planning, from selecting the day of the attack to ensuring Fabio would be alone. As the story unraveled, the public was stunned. The woman who had appeared grief-stricken at Fabio's memorial was now accused of orchestrating his murder. In 2017, both Monica and Robert Baker were arrested. Baker was charged with first-degree murder. Monica faced the same, along with conspiracy charges. To this day, Monica maintains her innocence. Her trial has been delayed multiple times and is still pending as of 2025. Her defense team argues that there's no direct evidence she ordered the killing, only circumstantial claims and digital messages taken out of context. But prosecutors remain firm. The timeline, the motive, and the financial reward all point back to Monica. Behind the salon lights, the smiling family photos, and the perfect suburban life was a plot darker than any fiction. A woman who allegedly chose desire over devotion and death over divorce. Fabio Sementilli died not at the hands of a stranger, but, if the charges are true, because the person he trusted most wanted him gone. His daughters lost a father. And Monica? She may lose the rest of her life to a prison cell. 6. Jennifer Gledhill. Jennifer Gledhill lived a quiet life in Utah with her husband Eric. On the surface, they were the picture of a normal middle-aged couple. No history of domestic violence, no glaring red flags, no loud neighbors reporting screams or disturbances. But in 2023, that silence was shattered by a discovery so bizarre, so haunting, it left both investigators and locals stunned. Inside a rented storage unit, a man's body was found wrapped in plastic and buried beneath layers of concrete. That man was Eric Gledhill, and the woman who allegedly put him there? His own wife. What's even more chilling is how it all came to light. Jennifer herself walked into a police station and confessed, not just to killing her husband, but to hiding his body for months. Authorities say she admitted to shooting Eric in their home in November 2022, then storing his body in a freezer for several weeks before transferring it to a storage unit she rented under a fake name. There, she attempted to create a makeshift tomb, covering him with layers of cement, tarps, and plastic sheeting, as if trying to bury the guilt along with the body. Investigators were floored. They described the case as one of the most methodically concealed homicides in recent state history. But what shocked them even more was the motive. Jennifer didn't claim self-defense. She didn't allege abuse. According to court documents, she told police she was simply tired of his controlling behavior and wanted peace. Prosecutors allege it was a premeditated act driven by emotional detachment and years of growing resentment. The investigation revealed months of strange activity. Jennifer had stopped contacting friends and family. She told neighbors that Eric had gone to visit relatives out of state and even maintained his social media accounts to avoid suspicion. Surveillance footage showed her buying buckets of concrete mix, plastic sheets, and even a shovel, all with cash. But it was her demeanor during the confession that left detectives most unnerved. Calm, composed, as if relieved to no longer be hiding. Authorities say she later moved Eric's body from the original storage unit to another one, fearing police were closing in. When officers searched both locations, they found tools, industrial-strength cleaner, and handwritten notes that prosecutors argue are part of a cover-up. Jennifer was charged with first-degree murder and desecration of a corpse. Her trial is scheduled for December 2025, and she remains in custody without bail. In a state known for its peaceful suburbs and family values, this case cut deep. A woman who could have left, who could have walked away, allegedly chose to eliminate her husband and live with the secret instead. But in the end, the weight of what she'd done caught up to her. The truth wasn't uncovered by forensics or tips. It was revealed by her own voice, walking into a station, asking to speak, and admitting, "I did it." Sarah Hartsfield. In a small town outside Houston, 2023 began with a medical emergency that quickly turned into a murder investigation. Sarah Hartsfield, a 48-year-old Army veteran and former corrections officer, had just rushed her husband, Joseph Hartsfield, to the hospital. He was unresponsive, his blood sugar critically low. At first, it looked like a diabetic emergency. But doctors soon realized something didn't add up. And the deeper they looked, the more sinister it became. Joseph was not diabetic. That fact alone sent shockwaves through the emergency team. Tests showed he had dangerously high levels of insulin in his system, enough to kill a healthy person. When police were called, they began investigating Sarah's actions in the hours before his collapse. What they uncovered painted a chilling portrait of manipulation, control, and a woman with a disturbing history. Sarah had been married 5 times before Joseph. One of those former husbands died under mysterious circumstances in 2018, shot in what she claimed was self-defense. No charges were filed at the time. Another ex had filed for a protective order, claiming she was dangerous and unpredictable. Court records and testimonies from previous partners suggested a pattern: intense relationships, sudden control, and then chaos. But it was Joseph's case that finally tipped the scale. Investigators say Sarah delayed taking him to the hospital for hours, even after seeing signs of distress. Surveillance footage from inside their home, footage she forgot to erase, showed Joseph collapsing while Sarah walked past him multiple times, ignoring his pleas for help. Detectives found vials of insulin hidden in drawers and logs on her phone, suggesting internet searches on insulin overdose timelines. Her story changed multiple times during interviews. At one point, she claimed Joseph administered it to himself. Later, she said it was an accident. Prosecutors believe this was cold-blooded murder, planned, executed, and concealed with chilling calm. Sarah was indicted on murder charges in early 2023. The case has since drawn national attention, not just for the method of the alleged killing, but for Sarah's history. Some media outlets have called her a Black Widow, pointing to the series of failed, fatal, or violent relationships trailing behind her. Her defense team insists she's innocent, painting her as a misunderstood woman who has been unfairly demonized. But as the trial date approaches, currently set for September 2025, more questions than answers remain. Why would someone with so many chances to start over choose death again and again? And how many of her past partners might have been silenced before anyone ever looked? In Joseph's case, he didn't die in an alley or on the battlefield, but in his own home, allegedly poisoned by the one person who vowed to care for him. The syringe may have delivered the final blow, but it was trust and love that became the true weapon. 8. Donna Adelson. Donna Adelson was not the kind of person you'd expect to see behind bars. A wealthy Miami grandmother, respected in her community, with a family full of doctors and lawyers. But in a case that stunned Florida and made headlines across the country, Donna isn't just the grieving mother of a murdered man. She's now accused of orchestrating that murder from the comfort of her own home. The story begins in 2014. Donna's son, Charlie Adelson, had been embroiled in a nasty custody battle with his ex-wife's brother, Dan Markle. Dan was a well-known Florida State University law professor and had recently divorced Charlie's sister, Wendy Adelson. Their split wasn't amicable. There were restraining orders, court motions, and a bitter fight over Wendy's desire to move their children from Tallahassee back to South Florida. Then, in broad daylight, Dan Markle was shot in the head outside his home. It was an execution-style killing. Police struggled to connect the dots for years, until 2016 when Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia were arrested. Two men from Miami with no clear link to the victim, but they had one thing in common: a connection to Catherine Magbanua, who was dating Charlie Adelson. Slowly, over years, the web unraveled. Charlie was indicted, Catherine was convicted, and now, nearly a decade after the crime, Donna, the family matriarch, is sitting in jail, accused of helping plot and pay for the murder of her ex-son-in-law. Prosecutors allege that Donna was involved in every stage of the plan. In emails and phone calls, she pushed for solutions to end the custody battle. She offered Wendy Adelson a hit as a divorce gift, a line that now reads like something from a crime novel. Wiretaps, phone records, and text messages placed Donna not at the scene, but at the center of the orchestration. When authorities closed in, Donna tried to flee. In 2023, she was arrested at the Miami International Airport, attempting to board a one-way flight to Vietnam, a country with no extradition treaty with the U.S. She was taken into custody, charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder. She has pleaded not guilty. Her defense paints her as a frightened elderly woman, terrified by prosecutors who had already imprisoned her son. But prosecutors argue that Donna was not just aware. She was active. The engine behind the murder, the voice whispering instructions, the money that made it happen. The trial is expected to take place in 2025. If convicted, Donna Adelson may spend the rest of her life in prison. And if so, it won't be just another tragic case of a family torn apart. It'll be the story of a grandmother who, faced with family embarrassment and court custody loss, allegedly chose blood over pride. Over 9. Ahang Mirshojae. On the surface, Ahang Mirshojae lived a glamorous life. A Persian-American businesswoman in Beverly Hills, she enjoyed the trappings of wealth: designer handbags, luxury cars, and lavish vacations. But beneath the glitter, her life was unraveling. And when her marriage ended, prosecutors say she didn't just want freedom. She wanted revenge. In 2021, Ahang divorced her husband, Dr. Ahang Mirshojae, a well-known dentist and businessman in Los Angeles. The split wasn't amicable. Court documents show it was a bitter, drawn-out battle involving property, money, and child custody. But what no one could have predicted was what came next. On November 3, 2022, Dr. Hamid was ambushed in his own driveway. As he stepped out of his black Mercedes SUV in Woodland Hills, gunfire erupted. He was hit multiple times and died at the scene. There was no forced entry, no robbery, just a calculated hit in one of LA's wealthiest neighborhoods. Detectives were baffled at first, but security footage, phone records, and digital forensics soon began to tell a chilling story. Prosecutors alleged that Ahang hired two men to kill her ex-husband, and not just any men. One of them, a man named Asadullah Asad Niazi, had ties to her family. According to the DA's office, Ahang provided the location, the schedule, and even a down payment. What unfolded wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime of passion. It was a cold, clinical execution. They say she wanted her ex out of the picture, permanently. In March 2023, Ahang was arrested and charged with murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder. Prosecutors revealed that she had allegedly used intermediaries to plan the killing. Phone pings placed her in constant communication with one of the shooters. Surveillance footage even showed her circling the neighborhood days before the murder, casing the scene. The case has shocked the Persian American community in California, many of whom knew the Mirshojaes as a well-to-do, respectable family. Now, courtrooms are filled with whispers of betrayal, pride, and calculated cruelty. Ahang has pleaded not guilty. Her attorneys argue there's no direct evidence placing her at the crime scene. No DNA, no murder weapon. But prosecutors insist the digital trail is damning. Her next hearing is scheduled for late 2025, and the trial is expected to draw national media attention. If convicted, Ahang Mirshojae faces life in prison without parole. For now, she waits behind bars, her designer world stripped away, accused of turning a custody battle into a contract killing. 10. Tanya Saucier, December 14, 2024. A quiet winter morning outside the Hancock County Courthouse in Mississippi turned into a scene of horror. Moments after a divorce was finalized, 45-year-old Tanya Saucier walked up to her ex-husband and shot him multiple times in broad daylight. Witnesses say there was no shouting, no warning, just a cold, calculated act of violence that left a man dead and a community in shock. Tanya and her ex-husband had been married for over a decade. They shared children, financial struggles, and a long, bitter divorce that had dragged through the courts for years. Friends say Tanya had become increasingly unstable, consumed by anger and a sense of betrayal. But no one thought she was capable of murder. On the day of the final hearing, court officials say Tanya showed no emotion during the proceedings. But as soon as the session ended, and her ex-husband exited the courthouse steps, she allegedly retrieved a handgun from her vehicle, approached him from behind, and fired several shots at close range. Panicked witnesses ducked for cover. Some called 911. Others froze, unable to process what they had just seen. Police arrived quickly and arrested Tanya on the spot without incident. The murder weapon was recovered at the scene. News of the shooting rippled through Mississippi and beyond. This wasn't a domestic dispute behind closed doors. It was a public execution at the very place meant to symbolize justice. For many, the fact that it happened outside a courthouse added a chilling layer of irony. Tanya had already won her freedom through the legal system, but she chose a bullet instead of a new beginning. Prosecutors have charged Tanya Saucier with first-degree murder and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Court records suggest she had purchased the weapon legally months earlier. Her defense team has not commented publicly, but is expected to pursue a mental health evaluation as part of the trial strategy. As of 2025, Tanya remains in custody without bail, awaiting trial. Family members on both sides have declined to speak to the media, citing trauma and fear. The children she shared with the victim are now caught in the aftermath, grieving one parent and watching the other from behind bars. Some call her a woman pushed too far. Others call her a calculating killer who chose the ultimate act of vengeance. Whatever the truth, Tanya Saucier now faces a trial that will decide whether her crime was an emotional breakdown or something far darker. They were girlfriends, wives, and mothers. Some were social media stars, others were churchgoers, caretakers, professionals. To the outside world, they looked like partners in love or women simply trying to make it through difficult relationships. But beneath the surface was something much darker. Resentment, rage, fear, or the cold pursuit of control. In every case you've just heard, a man ended up dead. In most, the story didn't end at the crime scene. It continued in courtrooms, jail cells, and families left shattered by betrayal. These weren't just tragic moments, they were calculated choices. And now 10 women are sitting in jail cells across America, waiting for the system to decide their fate. But the deeper question remains, what drives someone to kill the person they once shared a life with? Is it trauma, power, desperation, revenge, or something that even they can't explain? We often hear about men committing acts of intimate partner violence. But when it's the woman, when it's the one who's supposed to nurture, love, or forgive, the shock runs deeper. It forces us to question everything we think we know about gender, trust, and the psychology of control. As their trials unfold, each of these women will either be convicted or walk free. Some will claim self-defense, others will argue mental illness, and some will simply say nothing at all. But behind every mugshot is a family forever changed. Children without parents, lives split into before and after. So now we leave you with a question. When love turns into something deadly, is it murder or the final act in a life already broken? If this story left you thinking, don't just scroll past. Tap like, drop a comment, and hit subscribe. We cover real people, real crimes, and the truths no one wants to talk about.